لا يزال الخير حيا لا يزال إن في الدنيا سلاما وظلال أخبر الأيام أنها في وصال قم بنا.
In preparation for this panel, I decided to research what feminism was. Of course, we hear quite a lot about feminism when we're on social media. We see posts, we see a lot of things that are happening. When I researched it though, what I realized is that there's this huge world of feminism and there's so many different opinions on what it is and how it works and how it plays into being Muslim. To be frank, it can be a bit confusing when you see so many different terms and how they're used. So to start off, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to give us a quick few sentences of what they interpret feminism to be, and from there we'll see how the rest of the panel goes. So start from our right. Okay, so you want to give your introduction? We can start with that.
So, all right. So just want to say Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Okay, so I just want to first off just give my quick take, inshallah, on my approach to feminism, inshallah. So even though I just want to say that I am totally against the way this topic has become so polarized, especially online. But, on the other hand, as a teacher of, Islamic theology, I obviously have some concerns about any type of, ideology or thought system that is, that I'm not saying feminism is directly opposed to Islamic thought, but what I, obviously I get concerned if someone begins to use any type of paradigm that is against Islamic teachings, right? So I do recognise that there are different types of feminism, and I know it means different things to different people, but I think the main thing that I just wanted to bring across for this conversation is that we need to keep in mind that it is a man-made, or should we say female-made system, and so the way that we deal with this, is to deal with it in the same way we would with any man-made thought system, which is that, you're going to find some things within feminism that could be in alignment with Islamic teachings, right? Such as, working to support and take care of women and protect their rights. But it's also possible that you can find other things that could be in opposition to Islamic teachings, such as seeing maybe men as the problem, and everything being controlled by the patriarchy and things like that. Well, Islam teaches us, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. The believers are supporters and awliya of each other. So, like with studying any other science or philosophy, it could sometimes, we know that sometimes it can help you more to, it can help you to more effectively draw on your Islamic teachings and reflect on our implementation of them. But at the same time, I just think it's fair to say that, diving into any study which is of a man-made ideology, whether it's feminism, whether it's philosophy, or even certain parts of psychology, and you don't have a strong Islamic foundation to start off with, and you don't know how to sift through the information you're receiving and distinguish what is in line with Islamic teaching and what isn't, then it can be potentially dangerous for that person, right? So that's one side to what I feel about it. The other thing is too that in regards to what's happening online in particular, I feel we spend far too much time arguing about feminism rather than trying to actually solve the real life issues that are often causing sisters to be pushed into that direction in the first place. And the other thing is too that I find that the feminist label is very often readily used to, drown out the voice of any sister who, raises legitimate concerns regarding the rights of women or injustices faced by them. So that's what I just want to quickly just bring to the table, and I probably won't get much more to say after that, inshallah, with other four sisters on the panel.
Thank you. We'll probably look into more of what you've said as we keep talking.
Yeah.
Dalia, would you like to continue?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Feminism, again, general definition that you could find anywhere is basically the equality of men and women rights, whether it's social, political, and all these other rights, subhanallah. So for me, my issue with that is who defines equality and who defines what equal rights are. I think that's a very, very important question to ask. And are these consistent? And are these really beneficial to the whole of humanity at large? So for us, subhanAllah, without a doubt, there is discrimination against women, and that's a universal issue, subhanAllah, that culture of discrimination against women. Nobody can argue against that. That's not even unique to Islam and the Muslim world. So, but in Islam, and from an Islamic perspective, we were given rights that, even the first and second and all that feminism wave, subhanAllah, they spoke about, equal pay, women working, even, they were discussing whether women had a soul at a stage. That stuff, for us, that's what, subhanAllah, this discussion should be about. It's about reclaiming our rights that have been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not coming up with anything new, I believe. And that's where we have to fill the gap between where we are now and where we would like to be in a way that is in line and has an Islamic framework.
Thank you. Nuruddin?
So I'll just add on to that by saying, even when we use the word equality, then we have to ask, is that always appropriate? Is it always appropriate to fight for equality between men and women? And then a part of the definition of feminism is also simply organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. So we have to ask what rights, as you mentioned already, what rights are we fighting for, what rights are legitimate to fight for, and what rights are, what interests are also legitimate. I think that when we're talking about the definition of feminism, it's also valuable to ask what are the manifestations of feminism in our society. So there's been a questioning of traditional gender roles, a questioning of, is a woman's value in her just getting married and having children, or is it more than that? A question of the value of the home versus the value of public. So I think that's also important. Even the specific rights that feminists have fought for, whether it's abortion or now there are a lot of feminists now who are fighting for the right for women to engage in sex work, what was once called prostitution. And my apologies if America is a bit further, a little bit more liberal than Australia, so maybe some examples are relevant to you all. So that's also an important part of the definition. So when we as Muslim women are asking whether or not we should engage with feminism, it's both at looking at the definition, does that fit with what we as Muslims believe? And then looking at its manifestations, do we want to be connected to something that has these particular manifestations in society? Is it relevant to us, and does it align with our beliefs and practices?
Yep, thank you. Just before continuing on with our other panelists, can we just define what exactly feminism means?
Well, it depends. Is your definition of feminism aligned with the Western type feminism? So we have to start with asking ourselves, how did feminism come about? It came about in an era where feminists were fighting in the prism of a capitalistic, liberalistic society where the society itself was, the benchmark for the society was capitalism, it was liberalism, there were secular benchmarks for society. If we are defining feminism in that respect, then we say, obviously, in my opinion anyways, that Islam is not compatible with feminism. That's not the definition that I'm taking from today. If we are saying that the Muslim woman, their rights, as aligned with the Quran and the Sunnah, and that would be the benchmark for the rights of Muslim women, and upholding those rights, reclaiming those rights, and if we're going to identify it through that prism, my opinion would be that do we need a term of feminism? Because we have to ask ourselves how it was created or how it emanated. It emanated not from an Islamic perspective, not from an Islamic benchmark. So do we really need this feministic definition, or are we just really reclaiming our rights as originally given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Quran and the Sunnah? And so do we need this? So if we ask ourselves how feminism emanated, it didn't emanate from the Islamic world, it emanated from a secular system, not aligned with the principles given to us by the Sunnah and the Quran. So if we are reclaiming our Muslim women rights as divinely given to us, then we don't need this feminism and this term of feminism, in my opinion. But I think what we're finding today, and this is what I wanted to explore a bit more today, is if in our locality, a lot of women are disadvantaged in our community. And I just want to raise one example, is this photo that came up when the terrorist attack happened in New Zealand, when we had a photo of a lot of our leaders all in a huddled up group, and which went kind of viral on Facebook at the time. And there was only one woman in that photo, and that was a white Western politician. And that started the conversation for how women are treated in our communities, in the local community. And I think we need to differentiate feminism as a benchmark from how the secular sort of benchmark to our God-ordained rights, and how potentially our community, through politics, through culture, have twisted that and trying to use Islam as some form of a way to kind of minimize some people, minimize the rights of women. And I think that's where we need to address this topic today.
Yeah, thank you. Brandon, would you like to talk?
Pay my respects to elders past and present. I was told to prepare like a 3 to 5 minute spiel. I'm coming it right back, but I just wanted to say that one of the strongest intellectual and ethical struggles among critical feminism of women of colour or the global south is decolonising our way of thinking. And to separate Islam from feminism is to engage, I believe, in a very Christian-centric way of approaching knowledge. We must unlearn how to learn in order to free ourselves from this colonial baggage. The idea that there is Islamic knowledge and secular knowledge is a distinctly Christian idea of the division between church and state. I would argue that there is no other religion in the history of this world which asserts its right to take up space in every field of knowledge. Islam is science, law, politics, economics, social science, psychology. It was Muslims who taught the world that a Muslim could approach systems of knowledge and theories produced by kuffar, to put it bluntly, without any sense of transgressing Islam, and then go on to remake and extend that knowledge using Tawheed as the reference point. When I say I am a feminist, I'm not speaking about a resistance identity. It's not a brand or a slogan. A critical feminism is a project identity. It's a project that is concerned about race, war, economic inequality, criminal justice reform, immigration policy. And so we see that commitments and concerns over justice, freedom, and dignity of critical feminists are contained within Islam already. Articulating these struggles under a feminist framework, I believe, within Islam as the denominator for a Muslim feminist, offers our work a recognisable framework today. And because we recognise the urgency in the undeniable fact that when a boy and a girl are born into this world, a boy is born into a world that privileges his life chances and the girl into a world that threatens hers. I can say I'm fighting Islamophobia and race, but it is post-colonial feminism that has equipped me to expose how Islamophobia and race have historically and today impacted on you differently to them, to men. It impacts on you as women more. I can say I'm against discrimination in employment, for example. The fact that if John and Muhammad apply for a job, John is more likely to get the interview. But it is the intellectual labour and policy activism of feminist economics that turns our attention to the fact that if Muhammad, John and Aisha were to apply for that work, for that job, and altogether they would both receive more of a salary than Aisha. It is a critical work of feminist economics in the global south that reminds us that the work people like Muhammad, John and Aisha do in the west often depends on the labour and exploitation of men and women in the global south. And it is that feminist project of Muslim women who offer a critical lens by which we start to examine what it means to be a Muslim girl, a Muslim woman in this late modern world. It gives us the critical tools, for example, to start to ask critical questions about, for example, the relationship between the global billion-dollar fashion industry and neoliberalism and the consumer individual. It's anti-colonial and anti-racist feminism that demands we stand up as Muslims with indigenous women in this country who are incarcerated and having their children stolen from them. It is Islamic feminism that demands to ask, why is it that when women in this community in Sydney seek a divorce, very often they front up in front of all male panels? Isn't this violence? It is akin to the violence of black men being tried by juries in all-white juries. So some might respond, the rebuttal point is, to say all of this, you can still fight for justice without the label feminism. It's too loaded as a Western construct. But for me, honestly, it feels a bit like people who are anti-unionists. They like to have their weekends and sick pay, but don't acknowledge that without the struggle, we'd all be working in the salt mines for 2 cents an hour still. There is power in this word feminism, and if you know your history, you know it doesn't belong to white women. A critical feminism can be inspired and guided by Muslim women who have engaged in feminism since the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the streets of Gaza, in Lebanon today, women studying in madrasas, the Arab Spring. And I say this all to you as the mother of 2 boys and 2 children who I try to teach to be anti-racist, to be environmentalist, to be feminist through example and explicitly as well, because sometimes we need a language within which to contain our justice projects.
Thank you. So you've mentioned that feminism has its own history and its own context that it came about. Do you think that that can apply into the Muslim framework? Because as Mona was saying earlier, she was saying that feminism isn't something that, like, if we look at the history of feminism, that's not what Islam is working for with feminism. Islam has its own definition of justice for women and how women should be treated. Do we need feminism in Islam?
What I'm trying to argue is that it doesn't have to be dichotomous, that the struggle of feminism for justice, that as Muslim women, we can use our principles as Muslims, our jurisprudence to define what, it's not in competition with Western frameworks. We can remake it and refashion it according to our local context, our global context, and it's something that we shouldn't be scared of because we feel that it is a contradiction of Islam. But that's why I say that feminism as a project is distinct from feminism as a brand or a slogan or an identity. That the impetus for a feminist project is already contained within Islam, the idea of justice and dignity. And it is also quite a misunderstanding, this idea that feminism is about formal equality between men and women. There are many kinds of feminisms, and sure, there are the radical, fringe, the kind of examples that are often used as a scare politics, that if we do this, then there's going to be no sense of Islam left. But it is up to us to have confidence in our faith that we can impact the way feminism is interpreted in this world, and we can bring our own systems of knowledge to bear down. I don't need to seek permission from a white body of knowledge to bring my opinion. Why don't they take their advice and knowledge from me? And that's why we need to step up and say, here is our way of being feminists as Muslim women without compromising ourselves.
Right, so we agree that, so we might not necessarily agree whether Islam needs a term feminism, but we definitely know that Islam or Muslims in where we are right now need something that uplifts women, something that's given women, something for women to hold on to and for them to feel like they can, for them to be able to fight back as opposed against the oppression that they feel like they're facing. So, Dalia, what do you think are some of the issues that Muslim women are facing that makes them feel like they do need feminism?
Well, subhanAllah, a lot of Muslim women turn into feminism because they're suffocated in the traditional Islamic spaces. As Linda rightfully said, you've got predominantly, subhanAllah, most of our religious and influential spaces are dominated by males. I've been working with the Muslim community, specifically with sisters professionally and on a community level for the past decade. And subhanAllah, the issues are real. People want to just pretend. Sometimes when you speak, you think you're whinging or you're just, alhamdulillah, I'm very happy with the males in my family. Alhamdulillah, I'm privileged. I've got a very supportive husband who's here, wonderful father, brother, subhanAllah. But from my experience and what I see women go through on a day-to-day basis, I cannot help but, just really feel a sadness all the time because of the state that we are in. So I get things like, I do a lot of coaching one-on-one with clients, and, apart from the DV, domestic violence that is just crazy in our community, the spiritual abuse in the name of Islam, women are put into their place in the name of Islam. So a lot of them, subhanAllah, struggle to understand, and that's, again, something that that's another issue, but a lot of the time women are actually being told that what they're doing is haram, or they're being told that Allah's not going to be happy with them, or they're destroying the family for them to reject and say, why are you being abusive, or to accept the fact. I had a sister who her husband would spit on her face every single day, and when she went to a sheikh, he said, he's just got temperament, he's just angry, so that rhetoric is extremely dangerous, and it's damaging our communities, and it's damaging our women, and there's no revival with half of the population and the half who actually raises the other half is in that state, subhanallah. So the revival of the Muslim woman and the reclaiming of women's rights, it's not just for women, it's for society at large. And we have to start thinking this way. This is not a fight between men and women. This is not a fight between, we all, as Jamal said, we are shaqa'a rijal. We are equal in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah created us to help and complement one another, not to fight with one another. And that's with these discussions, with these gender discussions, my issue is it becomes like we're fighting the wrong fight. We're fighting each other. We have to understand that we have an issue, and both men and women are, against this issue. We're not against each other. That's really, really important to emphasize. So from the issues I see, as I mentioned, subhanallah, there is, I mentioned a few here. We've got, there's a lot of emphasis on women dress, marriage and divorce, fiqh issues. They're really harsh. They're out of context. A lot of the times, there's an obsession with women's place in society. As I mentioned, religious institutions dominated by men, subhanallah, and they create the policies. They are the ones who build the masjid plans. Hence why we have the living space at the back with no AC. And even that space, in the last days of Ramadan, we get out of that place because it has to be a place for men to do i'tikaf. That happened actually to me in Ramadan, last Ramadan. I finally found a place to pray. It was close to home. And in this little tiny place for sisters, subhanallah, in the last 10 days of Ramadan, we get an announcement. We hear that, sisters, you can't come to Qiyam or Ramadan or Taraweeh in the last 10 days because the brothers want to move into your little space that has no carpet, that is dark. And I had a sister, I embrace, I understand, subhanallah, I'm beyond that because, alhamdulillah, from my experience and little knowledge. But I had a sister, a university student, who told me, is there ibadah more important than our ibadah? And I'm not going to come to the masjid ever again. These things are damaging. We have Muslim youth losing their faith, leaving Islam because of these things. And not one man from the mother's side stood up and said, brother, that's not right. You cannot, not have women and give them their space, subhanAllah. Like these little issues that we look at as they're not important or they're not, they can actually break a person. They make or break a person's faith. And we're using our youth because of our, I don't know if it's an ego or arrogance or just belittling of these conversations. So we need to be honest, we need to be open, we need to have the guts and not be, subhanAllah, I feel everybody's, they get very offended all the time. We live in a culture where everybody gets offended. I call it the snowflake generation. We need to be able to listen to each other and be open and for us to, fill that gap and build it in a way that accepts everyone and actually fulfills our Islamic, principles and faith. I call it reclaiming. That's why I don't call it feminism. I call it reclaiming women's rights. For me, and I identify as that myself, subhanallah, because I do believe that everything out there is, in our deen, and it's just a matter of Muslim women specifically and men to reclaim and apply that, inshallah.
So you've outlined some of the issues that Muslim women face in today's society that makes them feel mistreated. So for Jamal and for Nuruddin, I want to ask you guys, so looking back at the history of the Prophet how were women treated then? Was there a need for feminism at that time? And if there wasn't, or if there was, how did it progress throughout history that Muslim women are now feeling like they need feminism or they need something to fight for their rights? Jamal, would you like to start?
I just want to reflect on the fact that one of the greatest missions that the Prophet ﷺ came with was actually fighting for the right expression, but fighting for the downtrodden, and fighting for the rights of all those whose society wasn't giving them their rights, the oppressed. And in one of the hadith, for example, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inni uhaddiju haqq ad-da'ifain." Like, I warn you strongly about the right of two of the vulnerable. And who are they? Al-mar'a wal-yatim. Like, so the women and the right of orphans. So, as Muslims, I think we've lost our way. I do believe we've lost our way, where we're not speaking up for the oppressed. We've lost that. And that's why we really need to, all of us, men and women, we need to come together and start really, calling and standing up for justice. And, I just said, my brothers, for the sake of Allah, like, what does the Prophet ﷺ teach us? لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. Like, when you see something happening to your sisters, ask yourself, would you really love that for yourself? Because if you see something happening that you wouldn't love for yourself, You know, like basically sometimes you've got the qualifications but you get sidelined because you're, because you're a sister. You understand? So there's a lot of things going wrong, and with the treatment of our sisters, for example, unfortunately it's actually atrocious. Sisters getting, look, we've gone back to Jahiliyyah, let me tell you, with trying to get divorced. In the time of Jahiliyyah, there was no stipulation of 3 maximum divorces. A man could keep on divorcing his woman as much as he wants, and the iddah would just be delayed, and then just to play around with her, he would just go divorce her again. But Allah Ta'ala said no, 3 and that's it. Now what we find is men don't want to divorce their wives. They keep them strung on, they don't pay anything to them, they don't want to give nafaqah. They don't want to, they want to even want to deprive them of the right of their mahar. They know 100% that they are the oppressor in the relationship, but they still don't want to, they're so stingy, and they don't have enough fear of Allah, they don't even want to give them the mahar, which is her right to have. Do you know what I'm trying to say? There's so many injustices, and we need all of us to start really looking at where we're going. We have really lost our way. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything?
So I wanted to comment on this idea that what the women during the Prophet's time were doing was feminism. I think that idea in and of itself can be a kind of colonization, to say that this word that white women created in this particular time in history, now every woman that's ever fought for rights at any point in history, we're going to call that feminism. And I don't think they saw themselves either as solely fighting for women's rights. You mentioned the idea of someone being married and the man would say, you're like the backs of my mother. And we know the famous case that is then retold to us in the Quran of the woman who cried out. And when she was seeking recourse for her situation and going to the Prophet ﷺ to repeatedly ask him, please do something because I'm in this horrible situation, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a verse that would free her and all women subsequently from having to go through that marriage. But I believe when women were fighting for their rights in that situation, they were fighting ultimately for harmony. She wanted to go back to her husband, and how was she able to go back to her husband? Then he had to give charity. He didn't have enough money for charity. The Sahaba helped him to pay charity so that their family could be reunited. So I don't think that women will say, we're in a feminist panel, and there are men talking over a woman, and I can't even hear her. So at least I can hear the people who say. Right. I'm not going to be popular today, I know, but it's not fair. No, that's fine. I think that was going to come up later, but I was going to say that I think one of the values of feminism for Muslim women has been, it's unfortunate because we could get this from the Muslim community, but it has the ability to raise our voice, and to speak and have that empowerment that should come from the Muslim community, but sometimes does not. So I think the last thing I wanted to say on this point is that when it comes to the masajid, and there was a history in Islam of the masjid being this place that was given to the community, a piece of property that was forever given to the community. So there wasn't necessarily a board or ownership. And I think that alone can be a part of the issue. If men are building the spaces and they're on the boards, then they may be very inconsiderate to women. So just as a practical note, to build our own masajid and to be on those boards so that our voices are heard is very valuable.
I think, if I just may add to that point, I think there are many localized issues that Muslim women are facing, which it's imperative that we should address, and it touches on whether there are enough Muslim women scholars who are voicing their concerns, who can provide that advice to Muslim sisters. And Jamal is sitting right beside me. I have a client, I think he's in the audience somewhere today, who was brutally abused by her husband, who went to many mashayikh who, for example, tried to get a khala or divorce. All the mashayikh said, no, persist, obey your husband, words to that effect, even though she was in an extremely violent relationship. She then told me, she went to Jamal, and that all changed, for example. But we need more Muslim women voices in boards, in institutions representing a Muslim woman. There are many issues, for example, and I think Emma touched on this point when she said every time a Muslim woman wants to voice her concerns or wants to give her opinion on a subject, she's shut down by a lot of men, and they use the word "you're a feminist" to shut her down. And I think that is becoming more and more prevalent, that feminism is used to de-voice women. And that is becoming more and more of an issue. And I think there's a lot of issues, for example, how many women are affected in these boards who are issuing these divorces. I've had a woman client who have told me they've had to face men when they're trying to get a divorce, and they were shaking and crying, trying to justify their case to get a halak. No woman was present. There's many times when many issues around that I deal with in my line of work all the time, which is there's a predominant theme where males in positions, whether you want to call them a sheikh or otherwise, who these women feel that their justice as provided to them in Islam isn't being manifested because of the lack of representation of women on these panels. And I think there's numerous issues we as a community face here locally in that respect. For men marrying more than one woman, and the issues in relation to that's becoming more and more predominant in our communities, the secret marriages, and all these localized issues. For example, the mistreated, when we get a few meters of room in our masjid and the males get the bulk of the room, how our youth, our Muslim women youth who are trying to practice their faith, who are trying to use Islam to be empowered, how will that impact on them? And I think there are numerous local issues which are becoming a recurring theme for Muslim women who their issues, their voices aren't being heard. We all women of position here today, we're lawyers, educators, scholars, so forth. There are so many women who I deal on a day-to-day basis who are voiceless, who don't have any voice, who aren't recognized by Muslim men, mashayikh in our community, whose rights aren't provided or reclaimed as Bayla says, in accordance with the Sunnah and Quran. And I guess what I'm trying to address today is we need more representation of women in these positions to manifest the rights of Muslim women.
Can I just add to that? I think, subhanAllah, for that to happen, definitely that needs to be the case. How do we do that as women? I cannot emphasize the power of knowledge and ilm and seeking and knowing your deen enough. Because if you don't know your rights, how are you going to claim them? And that's something we take ownership and responsibility for as women, and we should know. An empowered Muslim woman is someone who knows her faith. Regardless of what you study, what you do on a day-to-day basis, if you don't know your rights, anybody can take my rights away from you. It's going to be easy, subhanAllah. The minute you know your rights, I was having a discussion the other day online with a brother. He was saying something along the lines of, a woman cannot enter Jannah if, without her husband's approval or rida or obedience. And he was citing the hadith, Nasam of Fardaha, the one who fasted months, and that's an authentic hadith. We cannot argue about that. I mean, I'm all for obeying the husband, definitely. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a prophetic hadith. So, but he was saying that's the only way to enter Jannah, right? And everybody was talking about all these different things, subhanAllah. But his argument was dismantled by just citing that 2 of the 4 women who completed their faith, Khadija, Fatima, and then we've got Zawjat Fir'aun, Asiya, and we've got Maryam. Asiya completed her faith and went to Jannah because she rejected an abusive and intolerant husband. Maryam alayhi salam never even married. So 2 of the 4 women who perfected their faith had nothing to do with the husband, and they entered Jannah. So he was quite astonished, by that answer. That when you know your deen, it's really simple. It's not that hard. So it's not a fight that we have to be, aggressive about, because it's not, when we do that, we put walls and we put barriers between the other person, subhanAllah. So reclaiming your deen and understanding your deen, sisters, is key, and for brothers as well, because we need to raise a generation that knows better. If a woman's empowered, she knows that her husband can't do X, Y, and Z. She knows that I should be at the table. It doesn't affect her, even self-esteem whatsoever, because she knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given her that. That's very, very important. Something I discovered in my studies, Islamic studies, I'm still a student of knowledge, alhamdulillah, and will always be, the difference between these issues, between Islamic Sharia and Islamic fiqh and jurisprudence. They're entirely different things. The Sharia, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nobody can actually ever argue about the Sharia. Salah, we all pray in all parts of the world. Siyam, everybody fasts in Ramadan. No one decides to fast in Sha'ban. That fiqh, we have fiqh, which is understanding. The word fiqh means to understand. We have 4 different madahib, and they're 1,000 years old, subhanAllah. We lack tajdeed. I'm not, I respect all the madahib, subhanAllah, but madahib, even the 4 madahib, the leaders of the 4 madahib differed. And, had to discuss things and talk about stuff, subhanAllah. And that's the area we're talking about. It's very, very important that women understand the difference and distinguish between the two.
SubhanAllah, it's true that women need to know the knowledge, and that knowledge empowers them, and that's a big step towards fighting against the oppression that's happening. So for Jamal and Nuruddin, both of you guys have studied Islam. What have you found in your experience of learning Islam? Because speaking in the Sydney context, at least, I hear a lot of complaints from women saying that there is access to knowledge, but that knowledge isn't accessed as the males are able to access it. So they don't have as much access to the fiqh opinions that are out there. They don't even have access to ask questions on issues that they might be facing. And there are, alhamdulillah, some female shaykhs that we have here in Sydney, and I'm sure the States have some as well. But it isn't as much as we see with the men. There aren't as many female scholars. So what has your experience been, and what can women do to make them learn more, to allow them to learn more of Islam?
I actually think we have a lot of opportunities here in Sydney. I think we've probably got one of the best opportunities in the world, actually. There's so much access. I mean, we've got so many Sharia classes all around Sydney, everywhere, There's a babysitting even available, and we have weekend classes. We have everything. I mean, it's just about seek and you will find, inshallah. Like, you're very blessed to live in Australia, and especially in Sydney, if you go around Melbourne or Queensland, you'll see a huge difference in what's available. And we've come a long way. I mean, I've been in this community for like about 30 years now, the Muslim community, and I can tell you, I remember how it was 30 years ago, and believe me, what women are going through today, they're going through far worse in the past. And alhamdulillah, because we are getting the knowledge now, a lot more now. And look, I've tried to make myself available online. I've got my Facebook page. I just want to open it up to any sisters. You ever need any, something clarified? Because when women don't know, as Sister Dali was saying, when women don't know where they stand in their marriage relationship, this can be taken advantage of. So it's good for you to know where you stand Islamically and what you can do, what you can't do. I think this is an important thing.
Since you're on this topic, can you just mention a few places that women can go to in Sydney to get some of that knowledge?
Well,
just for our audience.
But there's Masjid Imam Ahmed in Liverpool. There's UMA has classes where I teach in Masjid Sunnah, which is Islamic College of Australia. GRYC. There's lots of places around. Everywhere. Almost every association has something about it.
The more larger Islamic institutions across the globe, like Al-Azhar, New Delhi University, I know there's some limitations in relation to women. So
I'm only laughing because about, let's say, 25 years ago, I tried to apply at Qura because I wanted to, study through that way, and was quite saddened to find out that the doors of knowledge were very closed for females. But if you're a Saudi female, you can maybe study somewhere now, but it's been a very difficult path, so that's why I can't help. You know what I mean? It hasn't been easy, but look, alhamdulillah, the online world has made it so much better for women to seek knowledge, because if you can't seek knowledge in person, you've got a lot of online opportunities. So, seek out those opportunities. They're all over the internet. Just, reach out and find something.
Yeah, I also think it's really it's important. And sometimes I think that one of the best analogies we can use, because we all understand racism here and colonization, is to think about the feminist project, the struggle for justice and dignity, in the way that we would look at structural racism. So there's only so much that we can throw the burden back on women to say, empower yourselves, seek knowledge, educate yourselves. But last night I was having dinner with a friend, and I hadn't seen her for a while, and she was telling me about how she had finally escaped an extremely abusive marriage, a situation in which she was told to patiently persevere and endure the beatings, and for her children to endure the beatings. And I just remember driving home thinking, I'm going to sit on a panel tomorrow. I have social, economic, capital.
we all here have the luxury to dip in and out and refuse labels, to intellectualize this discussion. Not every woman has access to education, and they shouldn't have to, because the system, it is an absolute travesty that Muslim women today have more chance of justice in a godless legal system than our religious community. And that makes me want to cry, because I speak to students all year round in my capacity as an author, and I go to schools and I speak to students, and I speak to a lot of Muslim students, and particularly in the last few years I've been doing a postdoc looking at the generation growing up post 9/11, and I've interviewed more than 80 students in Sydney, Muslim and non-Muslim. And I can tell you how many students have said to me that they are scared to call themselves Muslims, Muslim girls, in schools, because they don't know how to respond to questions around gender, and they don't feel that they have points to rebut all the evidence of Islam being misused. They lack that knowledge, so they either disavow and reject their identity publicly, or they end up feeling that this faith doesn't empower them, because not all of them have families who are educated, who read, who understand, who have the access to knowledge. We have to stop talking as though we're all middle-class, educated people here. And I know we are, because you're mainly university students, but like you said, this is a faith, a religion for the marginalized, for the victims, and we need to step up to that. We really do. We are going to lose the next generation. My daughter came to me, she's only 13, and she had questions about what she had heard in a religion class, a year 8 class, where a wonderful, lovely imam, religious teacher, and I love this imam dearly, he's a wonderful man, but he without thinking, taught a year 8 mixed co-ed class, the boys are superior to girls in the eyes of the Quran, and didn't contextualize nothing. And you put that in the head of a year 8 boy, and that's the problems that we're enduring today. So as a structural issue, it's not about hating men, just as the way when we say let's fight racism, it's not about hating white people, it's about hating white systems and institutions. And before women step up, the men with privilege need to step up, because that's what we tell white people. You have the privilege that you've inherited, the material and symbolic dividends of colonization. You have the material and symbolic dividends of male privilege since the beginning of time. So this is your burden more than it is ours.
So the question now is, what can be done by each individual, each member in the Muslim Ummah to make women empowered and to limit the feminism, to limit the patriarchy and the oppression that they do face? Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I'd like to see happen more, like this is a small thing, but it's a huge thing. Like, so what I'm finding in the contact I have with many sisters is, unfortunately, a lot of our households, I don't know if that's everywhere, but definitely in Sydney it is, a lot of men feel that they have the right to basically, because of their position, they feel that they have the right to, basically belittle or maybe even abuse, their wife, thinking that they've been given some God-given right to do that. And what I really do think is important is that imams do speak about, kind treatment of wives in their khutbah, and that it's not acceptable to abuse your wife, belittle her, humiliate her, hurt her. It's oppression. It's oppression, and we have to speak out against it. And the reason I'm highlighting this, it's a very sad thing to say, but I actually asked my husband, who is a very ardent mosque goer, and my sons as well, and I asked them, have you ever heard an imam in any of the khutbahs that you've gone to ever speak about how a husband needs to, not abuse his wife, treat his wife nicely and look after her, and, this kind of message? And they actually told me no. We're talking about, and that really worries me, the fact that this is not being brought up in the, maybe, mashallah, your best brothers here, maybe you do go to a particular mosque that message has been given, but for a majority of people going to masajid, like the Jummah, khutbah, that message is not given to me. Most of the time, the blame is put back, no matter what the situation, the blame tends to go back on the woman. It's always, she's doing something wrong that's causing him to But we've got some really nasty cases out there. There's no way that the woman is responsible for these things. So I think that is a big thing. And then also besides that is changing the mentality amongst our brothers. You know, that this is not acceptable. If we hear a friend talking in a condescending way about their wife or, you know, about their about women in general, we need to pick them up for that. We need to wait a second, brother, what do you mean by that? That's your sister in Islam. Why are you talking about her like that? You know, we need to start questioning our brothers and pulling them up for this. Once it becomes non-acceptable in our society, that's the first step forward to, you know, lifting up to a higher standard. We Muslims are the most blessed on this earth. The region we've been given, we are the most blessed. But we're not exemplifying that in our practice, and that's the very sad thing. Thank you. Rahman?
Well, I think it starts at a grassroots level, right? You know, educating our youth, you know, informing our youth, that sort of thing. But also, it also has to, it's so entrenched in our system, in our way of thought, in our leadership, that we need institutionalized change, you might call it that. If we look at the board of directors of the National Imams Council, how many women are affected or are there present there? If we look at the people who make the big decisions on boards of mosques and that sort of thing, how many women are represented there? If we look at how many da'is that are females that are out there giving lectures, in Rahman is probably one of the main ones in Sydney, how many others are out there, you know, presenting a voice for Muslim women, teaching Muslim women? You know, there was a few talks this year about Muslim women, fiqh of Muslim women, and fiqh and the knowledge of Muslim women, and all that sort of stuff. And I had sisters telling me, how can I ask a man about the fiqh of menstruation? That sort of thing. You know, having the right female scholarship and allowing that female scholarship to be on those boards, to be in those institutions, and that sort of thing is absolutely critical. So I think it's institutionalized, but also at a grassroots level.
Yep. The question is, what can we do?
Well, I think it is important. Everything that everyone said thus far is important and a part of the puzzle. But I think it is also important that we focus on ourselves as individuals. One thing that I know, one thing that I know in the States, and I'm not sure about here, is that there aren't enough people who talk about a marriage contract and how much power there can be in a marriage contract in setting up exactly what you want and don't want in your marriage, from your mahar to if you don't want polygamy and a lot of other things that really can empower Muslims to being allowed to get a divorce easily if you put that in your contract. So that's just a practical thing that I think is really important. It's also important that we have a sense of self, because I think even if you know the ruling, even if you know the law, that you enter a marriage and you don't have self-esteem, you don't have a sense of self, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have. You're going to end up stuck you can end up stuck in an abusive relationship. And also, sometimes it's important that even when we don't know all of the fiqh, having a sense of yourself that no one is going to abuse me, no one is going to hurt me, I will leave now and then figure out what the fiqh rulings are, right? I think that's really important as well. The last thing I'll say, just to go back to an earlier point, is that when you're studying Islam, it's going to be a struggle no matter what. For men, women, yes, women have particular struggles, but it's going to be a struggle. And if more young women can go through that struggle, then that's the less women that have to go through it in the next generation. Because the more women who are scholars, then you're giving other women, younger girls, access to you as their scholarship, and they don't have to have the same discomfort or the same issues that they may have when they are trying to learn from male scholars.
Thank you.
On scholar, I just want to say that, again, I may not hold a popular view, but I do believe that change happens, it has to happen on both ends. So you need structural change, you need societal change, you need the systems to support us, and we do have broken systems. But on the other hand, the responsibility of the individual is also important. And sometimes when you speak in that realm, you get accused as being a victim blamer, or someone who's, basically blaming a victim. But subhanAllah, the victimhood mentality, and I come from that perspective, and I respect, and I acknowledge every suffering and every, struggle anybody goes through, without a doubt, subhanAllah. But in the tradition, in the Islamic tradition, the Prophet ﷺ, early Muslims, they were victims for 10, 12 years in Mecca. They were being oppressed, they were being persecuted, subhanAllah. But you can't stay and say, you can't continue on that, because you cannot seek power from those who hurt you from the first place, anyway. So you have to move away and create your own power structures and, alliances that help you overcome that. So they literally escaped in the middle of the night. Somewhere where could they establish themselves? So it's very, very important that we start with ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. This is a divine law. Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. This is not my words. And again, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us change starts from within. Again, that's not to exclude or belittle the fact that there are absolutely, wrong, misogynist, patriarchal systems and that we need to fight, absolutely, without a doubt. But you can't do that from emptiness. You have to start filling your own vessel and yourself and empowering yourself. So start with the self. For me, how we can empower this woman, I honestly think it starts from the home. I do believe that every dysfunction in society has to do with dysfunctional parenting. Whatever you want to call that problem. Personally, that's one of my personal, from what I've seen. If we raise a generation, busy ourselves with raising a balanced, pious generation that doesn't fight the little fights, that's not interested in fighting someone online because they gossip about them, or because they call them names, or let them fight those fights. Everybody fights the fight they stand for. We have better fights to fight for. We have a purpose to fight for. We have a purpose that has to be linked with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not make it even about ourselves. When we're talking about justice, when we're talking about haqq, when we're talking about reclaiming women's rights, again, it's not about us. It's about our ultimate, vision and ultimate goal, which is to enter Jannah. And that's a duty upon every single person, every single Muslim. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. They advise each other of haqq, justice, and they advise each other of patience, because it does need patience, because it's hard to do this work. It's extremely hard. All these ladies, may Allah reward them, mashallah, all the teachers, educators on the panel, it's not easy, because you're going to be in that realm, you're going to be called names. You're not going to be accepted by even your own community. They're going to call you, as you ladies mentioned, to put you down, you're a feminist, and the liberals will call you a bad conservative, a bad religious person. So it's not, but ultimately, realign your intention. Why are you doing this? Is this about, what is my intention in all of this? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will award this accordingly. So that's my point. Parenting is crucial to changing that. And I have another point I wanted to mention quickly. We need to have the absolute belief that change is coming. Okay, so we can, let's not invest in the issues as much as we invest in the solutions, inshallah. Because that can actually depress us to feel like, oh my God, look, we've come a long way, alhamdulillah, and there's a long way to go, but we get there. It's not an overnight thing, it's a cycle. It's something that, it won't happen spontaneously, it needs work. So we need to have that belief and that mindset that we want to do jihad for this justice. This is the jihad that we have to do, subhanAllah. And we need to also raise confident girls who know and understand their deen, who have the wisdom to call out prejudice and wrong, any form without complaining. We need to be our own agents for change. Sumya radiallahu anha stood for the oppressors. She stood and without being apologetic for who she was, and she was a victim. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward her accordingly, but she stood up for justice. So as much as we'd like to put barriers and reasons and excuses and blame people for why things are not happening, I actually think that's a cycle that is a vicious cycle and doesn't take us anywhere. Because we can sit here all day and say what's wrong with society and talk about that, but how is that going to move us towards solutions and actually making a change, inshallah, for our dunya and akhirah?
So we're about to finish off. Just before we finish, to each of the panelists, I'd like to ask you in 1 minute to give one final message that you'd want someone to take away from this. So we'll start from the right.
I just want everyone to try to speak up more against injustices, against oppression, especially when it comes to sisters. I can tell you there's a lot of sisters out there who come from traumatized backgrounds where there's been abuse, and unfortunately they then go and marry abusers, and their family accepts the abuse because they were abusers themselves. And those type of sisters, no matter, as the sister Dr. Randall was saying, really, rang true for me. Is that some people are not able to speak up for themselves. They have a lot of difficulty no matter how much knowledge they have. So that's why they need us. We need to be their voices. We need to stand up for them. And I think that, our sisters need to hear our brothers speak up, because that's going to relieve a lot of hurt and pain that they feel when they see their Muslim brothers, standing up on their behalf, ready to speak up on their behalf. Who's gonna want to go to feminism when you've got your own brothers and sisters standing up, speaking up for you?
Thank you.
To all the sisters who are here today, I encourage you to all take strength and take knowledge from everything that you hear and everything that you know of in Islam, and understand that you do have rights within Islam, no matter how difficult it may be sometimes, no matter how challenging it may be sometimes, no matter how entrenched in the institutions and in the boards and with the imams and with the sheikhs this may be. Just take comfort in the fact that you do have support. You're not alone. You have got sisters who are behind you. You have got a lot of brothers who are also very supportive of you. And seek out, get help, and also speak up. Speak up. As I said previously, we are all in an advantaged position here. There are many voiceless sisters, and I deal with that on a professional capacity daily. There are many voiceless sisters who are struggling and are suffering alone behind closed doors. Get out, help them, be a voice for them, support them, remind them that you're there for them, and just advocate for them as much as you can in whatever capacity you can.
I believe that the answer to justice and dignity is in Islam, that you don't need to look outside. And within Islam, we can find everything that feminism already calls for, and we can embrace it and wield it as a productive tool to bring about justice. We shouldn't be ashamed of that label. We shouldn't be scared of the way it is used as a weaponizing label against women. We should embrace it as women and men in partnership, because the ultimate goal here, if we can just question every action that we engage in, is what we are doing just. Because Allah is about justice. Allah stands for justice. And I think that once we have the capacity to understand with confidence that this is a religion that is about justice, then none of us can go to sleep at night feeling that what we are seeing today is acceptable. We all have to stand, Muslim women and men, together and refuse the labels that are weaponized against us, embrace them in the ways that we can, and actually build this community so that people come to us and say, we can be like them, that they come to us for justice, not the other way around, inshallah.
So I think it's valuable to have a holistic understanding of Islam, and unfortunately I feel that in our communities there's been so much of an emphasis on hadith and not on seerah. And I do think if you want a more holistic approach and understanding of Islam, then seerah is where you go, not sort of random hadith that people can use to throw at you to make whatever point they're trying to make. And through seerah, then we see the way that the Prophet ﷺ treated women. There's one story, and unfortunately I remember the husband's name, but not the woman, but where she was married and her husband struck her. And as soon as it happened, she went to the Prophet ﷺ's household and said, we can no longer be married. And the Prophet ﷺ gave her a divorce. So we have to realize that Islam is empowering, but you have to go out and find it. It is not always going to be handed to you by your local imam. You have to make that effort. And I think that we can, as individuals and as women, we are half of the population, right? So if you know that there is a masjid that doesn't have space for women, or if there's any place where you don't feel accepted, then I think we have every right to simply not go to those places, to support the places that we feel most comfortable in. And there have been some scholars who have taken, a more radical position on the issue of women on panels and said they're not going to go to a lecture or panel where there aren't women. And whether you agree with that or not, I think that positioning is valuable to say, if I believe in something, I'm going to put my mouth, my body, I'm going to put myself completely behind it, and I'm not going to support what I don't think is acceptable. And I think that all of us as women, as a group and as individuals can do that, inshallah.
Thank you. And just adding on to all these amazing responses by the sisters, and again, my advice is for both brothers and sisters, own your power. And this power did not come from any other source but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the source of power. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the source of power. And anyone who's ever made any difference in the world, or change, or stood up for justice, that's where genuine power comes from, subhanAllah. So He is the source of all power. And nothing threatens those who are weak than seeing strength. And that strength comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be the Muslim woman that Allah created you to be, not the Muslim woman that they, not the one they want you to be. That's the difference, subhanAllah. So you reclaim that and connect to that, and وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ, and hold, tight to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's no strength but the strength that comes and the power that comes from Him. That's my absolute belief, and that's my conviction, and that's where I get my strength, ultimate strength from, alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khair for sharing to all of you. I think one of the main ideas I got from this entire panel that we just had is that Islam has the answer, and Islam is where we should be looking for our answers to solve the issues that Muslim women are facing. And one thing for us to do, every single one of us in this room, whether you're male or female, is to speak up and to embody the principles that Islam has given us. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khairan to all the new returning speakers and the new ones. We have a few gifts for you, inshallah.
لا يزال الخير حيا لا يزال إن في الدنيا سلام